So I'm here today with Martin Henwood.
Yep,
And you're the vicar.
I'm the vicar of this parish, yeah.
And David
Lepine, who's written the history of the church and its current guide. That's the Lady Chapel there, the stonework. It's made of Kentish ragstone, which is a fairly ugly stone, which doesn't weather particularly well, and it hasn't got much of a finish to it compared with some. Benefit of ragstone is it's fairly local, Maidstone sort of way, so it's fairly easy to get here. And then above it you can see the battlements. So in the early 16th century, when there was a bit more money, they wanted to embellish the church. They put the battlements, and you can see the chequer pattern there. Right in front of you, you can see a Victorian porch, which has been rather crudely stuffed through what was once a window there. There were 3 lights to the Lady Chapel, and the back end of it is the, as it were, medieval offices, the vestry. And then behind it, you can see the tower. And that shows you very clearly, that's the oldest part of the church, probably about 1050 to 1080. So it might have been started just before the Norman Conquest, perhaps just after. And it was significantly lower, as you can see, because most of the construction there is actually flint work. And you can see the round arch of the window, which is the original Norman, late Saxon perhaps, and then much larger stone above it, again ragstone, and a totally different style of window. That's late 15th century, probably been restored a bit, but there's an extra stage to make it higher, grander, more impressive. Nobody wants a less impressive church than the neighbouring one. Because this was it tended to flood here. You can't see much of a churchyard because it's no good burying here, because the floods will come along and you just don't want someone rising from the grave before their due time. So most of the burials are actually up on East Hill, and there's still a big cemetery there, and there was a chapel up there which received a lot of devotion.
There's a rhyme about people being buried above the steeple.
Dartford people are dirty people. They bury their dead above the steeple.
Which is just a silly rhyme.
It is a silly rhyme, yeah. But it remains, yeah, it does, yeah.
I think you also need to talk about the Georgian slicing off of the church to make way for the carriages, because Dartford, everyone came through Dartford. You couldn't get down to the continent without coming through Dartford. So Dartford quite often figures in lots of travelogues of the 18th, 19th century, usually a disparaging remark about how dreadful the inns are. Because it was a convenient stopping off point here, 15 miles or so from London, so convenient to either change your horses, have a meal, spend the night here. And to that end, they cut off the bit here. You can see it's a rather odd shape. It would have originally come out square. So fashion and convenience trumps religion.
So what was happening is when they introduced the stagecoach, the horses needed a run to get up the hill. But with this protrusion, it stopped them running. So basically they thought, right, chop it off. And hence
you can see some
have this
odd bits of here.
There's a window here.
Yes.
There's an infield. Is that a doorway?
Is this
looks like
a
there's
small
later
door
doorway.
here? Yes.
Was there a bakery here, David?
I don't know.
I mean, I
Yes.
heard an explanation that actually there was a bakery here that operated inside the church, and that got cut off. But again, that might be sort of just hearsay, like that limerick.
Yes. I wouldn't put
Too much credence on it.
no, because it would be inside the church, even though it's in the nave, so it's not in the holiest of holies. But we should have a look at the great west window. That's a sort of the best bit of the church as it was in medieval times, and the glamour and the quality of the tracery, reticulated tracery, because it was a very important church in medieval times.
The tracery meaning
The stonework holding the divisions within the.
Well, that's not the original.
That is the original. That dates from the first half of the 14th century. Well, I think it's probably been restored and repaired.
Well, it was restored. It was damaged during the Second World War. There was a bomb that went off. That was one of the first things that we did when we repaired the church, was to repair that west window.
The surround on the similar window over there will date from the same period.
That's perpendicular tracery, so that's probably 100 years later. Perpendicular is, well, if you look at the, best thing is to look at the building.
Yep.
And if you compare the two windows, this one's got flowing curves, whereas this is much more perpendicular and horizontal, it's squarer or rectangular. It's just a way of dividing up to fit the glass in. And it's just a fashion, because medieval builders were not afraid to build in the new style and get rid of the old. This is the oldest part of the church. You can tell that simply by the architecture, round arches. Notice the way it's splayed out, so this side of it is wider than the window itself, because that helps the light spread more easily. And if you come here, you can see the way things have been changed and altered. There's a round arch there with a capital, the horizontal bit of carved stone, and again a round arch here. And typically, as the church is a living place and evolving all the time, it gets different things done to it. So, you know, what was Saxon and important is now a convenient hole to store some chairs in, which is fine. It's how it should be. It means we're moving on and growing and doing things. But you can look at, again, if you look at the stonework carefully, then you can see something of the history, and that things have, I mean, I haven't really looked at this before, noticed it, but you can see here, totally different type of stone. There's clearly a round arch there of finished work, and then it's been infilled. That is a Victorian doorway there. And there's even a bit of tiling there, which has got...
Yeah, that is Thomas Ford and Partners, the architects that did a lot of repair work in 2005-06.
They found it, or they just put it in?
Oh no, they put it in.
They put it in, yes.
Yes, they found some tiles and they did some repair, and they did it so it will look modern, and that will be known as the Thomas Ford and Partners part.
Yes, they've...
And that's why you've got to be very careful when you look, because
I could have been spouting off about Roman. I think they don't look like Roman tiles to me. They're far too small, apart from anything else.
So it just goes to show, really, that you know you use what's available from another period to construct another part of the church.
with a little help from Dr. Google, I'm going to try and set out what went on when. We began by looking at this side of the church, and the earliest bit is at the bottom of the tower, which could be pre-1066 and all that. The north aisle seems to be from the 1100s, but the back bit behind the tower came next in the 13th century, the 1200s. The main part of the nave dates from around the turn of the 1300s, followed in the 1400s by the Lady Chapel, which is where we began looking. Around this time, the late 15th century, the tower was raised. Near the turn of the 1800s, a series of significant renovations began. The corner was cut off, the nave roof was raised, and that brings us to A.W. Blomfield.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's really, really good.
When Blomfield got his hands on this, because I mean, he transformed the church in lots of ways. So I mean, this arch here is his work. The old arch was probably not much higher than the capitals at the top there. So it would have looked a bit pokey.
And you had the coat of arms.
It's quite a good example, but I mean, it looks like it's been shoved in the back of the wardrobe, doesn't it? It's sort of hidden over there, whereas it would have had a much more prominent place because it would have been.
I think it would have been on the...
I think it was above the arch. Well, there is a sense, if you look at lots of Victorian churches, there is a sense, I get the feeling, certainly looking at them, that the architects are partly trying to demonstrate how well they understand Gothic architecture and going through the full repertoire and getting it right. And I mean, it works.